Okay, so we're going to talk about the upcoming Sith raid changes that are going to be made in the next week. And this is pretty controversial. In fact, I wasn't actually even planning on making this video for today. I was trying to get my access code to Fortnite Mobile and make a video about that. They did not get me an access code yet, so I'm still waiting. So I'm actually really excited about that. But I didn't get the access code, so I figured I'd make a video about this. Now, I do want to say that I think a lot of the hysteria about the changes that are going to be made in this post to Jedi training Rey, I think a little bit people have a little bit too passionate about it. So what they're going to do is they're going to basically cut the exposed damage done to raid bosses in half. And it's not going to affect any other part of the game other than the raid boss. Now, I know a lot of people have said, well, why are you doing it for the heroic AAT raid and so on? Well, exposed damage in the heroic AAT raid usually is only 12%. I've done the math. So basically, a Jedi training raid team inside of the heroic AAT raid, it will be a damage reduction of about 6%. Now, in T7 of the Sith Triumvirate raid, I'm seeing exposed damage going anywhere from 35 to 50%. So that means that it's going to be an overall reduction of damage somewhere in the range between of 18 and 25%. So we're not talking about it's like completely removing all damage or anything like that, but they felt that this was necessary, and I'll let them explain themselves in this post on why they felt this was necessary. But this is not unusual. I don't think, if you've played other games, that this is unreasonable. They felt that Jedi Training Rey was too strong, and so they changed the way the exposed mechanic works, and they give a long list of reasons why they're going to do that. So they're still saying that Rey Jedi Training is one of the most effective squads in the raid, and they also changed the total health in Phase 1 by 5% across all tiers. Now, where I think that this nerf is going to affect people the most is in T6. If you're playing T6, that has the highest amount of health pool. So oftentimes in that raid, I've seen numbers where this exposed damage accounts for anywhere from 50 to 60%. So that means that is a 25 to 30% reduction in total damage with these teams inside of the Tier 6 part of the raid. Darth Treya Bonds of Weakness will no longer activate on damage abilities. That has to do with the Stormtrooper Han infinite loop in the raid, so that's no longer going to work. Now, I asked them if the raid was designed to be unbeatable, and they said no, it is beatable. I've talked to other people, and this raid is beatable without the Stormtrooper Han infinite loop in the raid. And also, I've talked to someone else, and I feel that this Jedi Training Rey damage reduction, the raid is still going to be beatable. Now, where it's not going to be beatable is like in the guild that I'm in. We were able to beat it at least once, but we're not the top guild in the entire game. I think that the very, very top guilds in the game will be able to beat this, but I think like the middle guilds, like where I'm at, are no longer going to be able to beat this Tier 7. I really think that Death Mark is going to be very, very important. Boy, like with Fulcrum Ahsoka, with Death Mark combos, I think that's going to be like a big part of this raid going forward. If you haven't heard by now, Jedi Training Rey is very good, and so is Death Trooper and his Death Mark. Okay, when raid Darth Treya becomes enraged, she will dispel all positive status effects on her enemies and apply an undispellable, unresistible buff immunity as well. And this had to do with a stealth Night Sister zombie thing where they could keep going. And then this actually is kind of a big deal. I know a lot of people were upset about this. They're in Phase 2, Darth Sion no longer incorrectly removed 100% turn meter using Torment. And that was a glitch, and that is fixed. One of the things that I asked them about was Nihilus in the first phase. When he annihilates, you know, it's frustrating because sometimes he'll choose not to, and sometimes he'll take that extra turn. He'll go 3 times. There's like a 50% chance of that. They want it that way, and I don't really agree with that, because what that means to me is that I will set up my team, and then I'll have to play it over and over and over and over again until I get a perfect run, and it means that I'm constantly resetting it unless I just don't have time, and then I just let it go through. So that's a little bit frustrating. Now, the rest of this, this is their reasoning on why they need to change Expose. We've been actively monitoring play patterns, player behavior, and community sentiment since the release of the raid. This change is part of our commitment to maintaining a healthy game for the long term, which means we occasionally need to make changes when unintended play patterns emerge. And what they were worried about is that, and this is their words, is that Jedi Training Rey was going to be the only thing that worked, and because Jedi Training Rey worked so well, there wasn't going to be any need to use other teams like the Deathmark team with Death Trooper. Basically, it's always going to be about Rey. The entire raid was going to be about Rey. So they wanted it to be not as strong, but still the strongest, and to encourage people to develop other teams. That's their thinking. I kind of get it, but I don't know if I'm fully vested in that idea. Late last week, we determined a change needed to be made to the Expose mechanic. However, we still need to undergo rounds of tuning and testing before settling on specific numbers. In our ongoing commitment with communicating with our players, we want to let you know the changes were coming in advance of specific deals to give everyone time to consider how that might impact their investment in certain characters. It's basically going to only affect, in my opinion, T6 and T7 of the raid, and it's not going to really change much in the heroic AAT raid. The numbers that I've seen, exposed damage in those raids was only about 12% of the total damage done by the character, so it's like a 6% nerf. They're cutting the exposed damage in half. Exposed design intent in history, and I want to say that from the context of the conversation I had with them last night, they actually knew that this might be a problem. They decided to let it go out the door the way it was, and then when the numbers came back higher than they expected, they decided to change. But this Expose thing, they actually kind of knew about ahead of time. So Expose was originally intended to be high risk, high reward mechanic. The intention was for it to behave like a damage over time, which is like 0.0001, and the Expose is 0.004, and now it's going to be 0.002. With the added complexity of requiring interaction to make it most effective. As a reward for this extra interaction, Expose did 4 times the damage of damage over time. That's what I just said. When Expose was initially launched, this worked out as we intended. With the introduction of Zeta abilities, Feign Zeta leader ability, and changed Expose to be a source of cooldown reduction and turn meter manipulation in the context of a resistance squad, this solved a couple of problems with the resistance faction, making it the most powerful, as well as giving it a clear identity. However, Expose at this point stopped being as much of a source of damage and more of a source of making resistance squads go faster. And then when they introduced Jedi Training Rey, and what I see the problem with Rey is that it's unresistible, and that's the reason why it's so good. We wanted to add a strategic augment to the resistance. Finn-led teams would rotate cooldowns more quickly. Rey-led teams would do more damage output. We were satisfied with the distinction between the two. When we decided to give Rey Jedi Training an unresistible ability, that's what I just said, Expose changed from being a high-risk, high-reward strategy to a strategy that had few of any downsides. At the time, this didn't present as a significant issue. Rey Jedi Training was performing as intended in PvP and in the existing raids. We were in the process of designing the Sith raid, so we knew we'd have a fresh challenge for Rey soon enough, or so we thought. Raid mechanics, we're going to keep going through this, and I just don't really think this is a big deal. I think it's going to cut the damage down, sure, maybe 25, up to 25%, but really it's going to be somewhere between 16 and 25% damage reduction in phase 7, but in tier 7, but in tier 6, it's going to be probably between 25 and 30%, and in the heroic AAT raid, it's only like a 6% damage reduction. It's not going to affect any other part of the game. Jedi Training Rey is still going to be very good. She's the team that I'm currently running in my arena. Love it. She does very well, even though Palpatine's better, in my opinion, but she still does very well. As we build raids, they become interesting time capsules of the state of power gear and synergies and the status effects at their initial release. Now, they're kind of implying that there's power creep. When the Rancor and the AAT were originally released, there was no Gear 12, no Zeta abilities, nor many of the synergies that now exist in the game. Furthermore, guild sizes and dynamics have shifted dramatically over time, also changing the way players strategize and interact with the raids. Raids have gone from something a dedicated feud to the thing that many dedicated Star Wars fans do together, which we think is awesome. As we develop new raids, we have 2 primary tuning levers, health and mechanics. There are other more subtle tools, but those are the largest and most obvious. Health naturally increases as the raids, as synergies and raw power trend upward over time. Additionally, our intent is for players to leverage as much of their roster as possible and accomplish larger and more heroic challenges. So what that means is that the health pool of this raid is much higher than the raids prior. And because the exposed mechanic is a % damage, it was more powerful in this Sith raid than it was ever designed in the earlier raids, because I believe like the Sith raid has almost like 3 times the health pool of the heroic AAT raid. And it kind of makes you wonder, one of the questions I asked them is like, well, just cutting it from 0.004 to 0.002, how does that fix it in the future when the next raid that comes out a year from now or 2 years from now will have 100 times the health pool? I don't know. I'll just make up a number. But the health pools of the raid are going to get bigger and bigger. And they said, well, we'll probably do something. There's a lot of solutions to that problem. They said, we could make the raid have 8 phases or something like that. So it was a problem based that it was a percentage based. So we're going to keep going. And I kind of wonder if that, Deathmark also has a similar problem. But Deathmark is not unresistible. So they kind of were in a funny position. Sith Lords are such iconic and interesting characters that the Sith raid was obviously an opportunity to introduce significant and intricate mechanical design decisions. So much of what makes Galaxy of Heroes as interesting is understanding the interactions between the many characters and abilities and gaining mastery over opponents in combat. With this raid, we wanted to add new layers of depth and see what strategy guilds would come up and use the results to inform emergent strategies for the future. The dilemma: to keep raids challenging over time, we had to increase the amount of raid health and the complexity of the mechanics. The problem is % based health mechanics become increasingly more powerful as the bot health goes up. I just said that. The exposed mechanic has become so powerful now virtually snuffs out most other strategies. Imagine if the raid had 6 times the health of the other one. It would be the only viable strategy. Our perspective is now that our overly wild single solve undercuts at what making the game interesting and present a threat to the future of the game. I actually asked them, why didn't you just do like a fixed number rather than a % health? Because a fixed number would fix that problem for future raids, but they think that they just know about it now and they're going to have to build the future raids around this. Question is, do we remove the ability to use one of our most fun and powerful teams by saying no expose? Or do we compromise and change the expose so its effects is mitigated but still powerful? We've opted for the later. And I just want to say, because one of the things that came up was, the tenacity is too high. And I think that's kind of an interesting concept. And I was actually talking to another YouTuber about that. There was a penalty in player versus player, for like Ahsoka, when you had like a Zeta Barris on the opposing team. You didn't want that. It didn't work well. But heroes like Ahsoka with Death Trooper's Deathmark or Rolo, I think we're just going to have to think about this raid differently and not be dependent on negative status effects. I'm not really comfortable with, the tenacity stacking a mechanic, and I asked them about that, and they want it that way, and that's just the way it's going to be. I think it's just going to force us to think about other things. I'm worried that this raid will be just about brute force and just getting as many characters to gear 12 as possible, and that's really the only way to beat it. I'm just hoping that with Death Trooper, there's going to be some tricks that are going to be discovered in conjunction with like Rolo and Fulcrum Ahsoka, and maybe it won't be as challenging as everybody's perceiving it to be. After testing, we believe moving expose from 0.004 to 0.002, basically cutting in half, will keep Rey Jedi training competitive in the Rancor and AAT, and also keep Finn Zeta Leader ability teams competitive as well, but will mitigate them being overpowered in the Sith raid. Additionally, the gap between expose and other emerging strategies is less pronounced, and which we believe will help spur additional lively theory crafting. They also implied that there's entire teams that we haven't figured out yet that'll help us beat the raid, and I actually believe that. I don't think that they're misleading on that. I think there is some extra teams that we haven't figured out yet. Making the change to expose, we're attempting to balance short-term enjoyment of the new raid content with the continued overall health of the game. The future, as we introduce new mechanics, game modes, and as the game's power level increases over time, we will continue to evaluate all aspects of long-term game health. At times, there will be cases where changes to the game are necessary. When those cases arise, we'll try to be as transparent as possible with the community. And that is CG Top Hat, who I've met in person. Actually, pretty nice guy. Very smart guy. All right, guys. I'm sure a lot of you are not going to be happy about this. I think there's a large number of people that don't even have Jedi Training Rey, and they don't care about this. They just see the Sith raid as being way too hard. It is designed to be very, 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 very hard, and in-game, high-end, very high guild content, and that is the way it is going to go. Also, I just want to say I'm really excited about Fortnite Mobile coming out. And I'm going to be playing that, and I'm going to have some access to some codes, apparently. The developers have gotten hold of me, and I'm hoping that I can get away the codes, because they're not releasing it all at once. They're going to do it, like, invite only. Like, I get a code, and I get 5 more codes, so be sure to look out for the video when that comes out for Fortnite Mobile, and I'll have codes. I'll be giving away the codes in that video, and my understanding is that on your cell phone, you'll be able to play Fortnite with your friends on PC and on their PlayStation 4 right from your cell phone. It sounds crazy. I don't know how that's going to work. I really want to just check it out. I'm very curious, and so I'll make a video about that. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching, and keep on gaming.